At 5 o'clock p.m. on June 30th, Vancouver Assistant Police Chief Jeffrey Morey will ascend to the top job. After a nationwide search, Morey was chosen to replace Police Chief James McIlvaine, who's retiring. Morey has nearly 30 years of law enforcement experience, having served as Washington County, Oregon Undersheriff before moving on to the Vancouver Police Department. Assistant Chief Morey, welcome to Eye on Northwest Politics.
Good morning, Mr. Body. Welcome.
What do you think will be your biggest challenge coming in as Vancouver Police Chief?
Well, quite honestly, and I heard Chief LaBelle talk about it, we're struggling with recruitment efforts, like a lot of other organizations, not just law enforcement. We have 25 vacancies right now, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that our community here gets the very best police officers, and our police officers are reflective of not just our community, but other large emerging metropolitan communities in the United States.
What's the size of your police force right now?
So we are authorized almost 240 officers. However, we've got those 25 vacancies right now. And as of June 18th, with Chief McIlvaine's departure, we'll have 18 departures this year, which we're on pace to potentially break last year's departure rate of 22 officers. So not nearly the numbers that Chief in Portland is dealing with, but for an agency our size, we feel the pinch.
Vancouver has its share of violent crime like most other cities, but statistically what really stands out to me are the property crimes, burglaries, break-ins, car thefts, things like that. What's your strategy to deal with that situation?
So that's like the wicked problem theory here. What do we do? So one of the things is, first of all, try to find the root cause of what some of these problems are. What we've noticed really at the start of the pandemic is these things really started to skyrocket on us. In the big scheme of things, though, I think our property crimes for an organization our size and a city our size is still relatively lower than average. But for us, it was a pretty significant increase, and our community members are letting us know. So, well, I don't want to give away all of our strategies here. We do want to leverage technology. I know during my tenure at Washington County Sheriff's Office, we were able to be fortunate to have technology that really helped us with things like bait packages, where people who were having packages delivered to their front porch helped us reduce those. Vehicle break-ins, catalytic converter theft, all of those, we had technology to really help us. So I'm looking to utilize more of that. And then quite honestly, getting more police officers out on the street so we can be very visible within our communities.
You talked about the number of police officers who have left. Is there a reason for that?
So part of it is just the growth in Vancouver. In the late 90s, the city grew exponentially, and all those officers that we hired have all come of age, and so they're eligible for retirement. What we have noticed, though, there have been a few of our officers that we've hired that maybe have 0 to 6 years on that just decided this really isn't the career for them. And so they either left law enforcement or they left law enforcement and left the area as well.
Late last year, you began testing police body and dash cameras. When will that roll out as a permanent program? And is the rank and file on board with this?
Yes, they are, and the city's on board with it as well. Chief Troy Price is helping with that. He's leading the efforts on those body cameras. We're in the final stages of our request for proposal award, and we're hopeful that this fall we'll have a full rollout with whatever vendor we do select.
You mentioned this earlier. You place an emphasis on community partnerships. What does that mean to you? And why is that important from a law enforcement standpoint?
Well, quite honestly, we get our authority to enforce people from the people. I mean, the Constitution gives us the authority to be police officers, but the people's willingness to allow us to police them is really a collaborative relationship. And so I come from the philosophy that it's much better to meet people before there's a crisis. Let's get to know our community. We're not, a million people in this community. And while we'll never get to know all 200,000, we should get to know at least our key stakeholders in this area and get to know the different neighborhoods and the different nuances that are involved in a city of emerging 200,000 people. And so we want to get community engagement at all levels of the organization and not just a handful of us. So that is going to be one of our main efforts that we do here.
Along those lines, like many other cities, Vancouver's relationship with the black community has been strained at times. You had a string of deadly police shootings in 2019, and more recently, the shooting of Kevin Peterson by Clark County deputies, but it was in that area. That has led to a lawsuit by his family. How concerned are you about the relationship with the African American community in the city of Vancouver?
I'm very mindful of it. In fact, one of the very first things I did here, so I joined the department in April of 2019, right after all of those deadly shootings. I joined the NAACP local chapter here and have developed relationships not only just with that community, but our LULAC community as well, because it's important, because you have to look at the history, not necessarily in the last handful of years, but just look at the last 100 years in here in the United States and the relationship law enforcement have had with our traditionally underrepresented communities. And we have to acknowledge that and recognize what happened in the past so we can learn from that and be better. And again, it gets back to those relationships. Let's learn each other. Let's understand how what our needs are going to be, and let's meet before a crisis.
Earlier this year, we all felt the loss of Officer Don Sahoda, mistakenly shot at his home by a Clark County deputy. How did that affect your department, and did any changes result from that?
So it affected the department greatly. And in my nearly 30 years of law enforcement, I have attended multiple officer funerals, but this was the very first time that an officer from my own organization was involved. And it was terrible because I knew Don. Don was well loved not only by members of this community, but members outside of this community. He had strong ties to Oregon. He worked many years as a Gresham police officer. He worked for the Port of Portland Police. So this resonated and rippled throughout the Portland metropolitan area. And to have another officer be involved in his death was really tragic. And we struggled as an organization, quite honestly, to find meaning for this. But the goods that's going to come out of this is better training, and more importantly, how we move forward in an organization like this after this event is going to be important just from the mental health. I heard Chuck Lavelle talk about the mental health piece. That is enormous, because when Chuck and I started our careers, mental health wasn't really being talked about. And having been involved in traumatic incidents myself early on in my career, I wish I'd have been able to offload some of those rocks personally, so you're not carrying around that baggage. And I want to send out the healthiest cops physically, but emotionally up here as well, so that they are being the best versions of themselves when they're interacting with people who may be having the worst day of their life.
As you know, we've seen a big upturn in gun violence in Portland. Are any of those problems finding their way across the river?
We're not immune to big city problems, but we don't have nearly the same volume of issues that our people in Portland are having. And I just want to say and give Chuck Lavelle a plug. He's been doing an outstanding job, and I've gotten to know Chuck for the last couple of years here, and I'm just so proud of the efforts that he's been doing over there. Portland is lucky to have him. We will always be good partners with them and learn from them as well, but we're doing our very best to keep that kind of issues from growing over here.
We've only got about 30 seconds left, but why do you want this job? Why did you want to be the chief in Vancouver?
I keep asking myself that same question, Mr. Body. I came here in 2019 to compete for this. This has always been a goal of mine. I wanted to be a football coach, and I knew that wasn't going to happen. I wanted to be the head coach of some place. I wanted to call the offense and defense. And here, I just want to role model the very best version of myself and make our community better.
Assistant Chief Morey, thank you for being on Eye on Northwest Politics, and congratulations on ascending to the top job.
Thank you, Mr. Body.